Hey guys, in this week's Casually Criterion episode, we're going to talk about Night of the Living Dead. But before that, we're going to talk about seasons 1 through 4 of The Expanse. And then we're also going to talk about a recent New York Times article titled, "Why Are There So Few Black Directors in the Criterion Collection?" So, join us!
Welcome to the Casual Cinecast, powered by Cinelinx. My name is Chris, and with me as always is Mike. I have a question for you. What's the first thing you do in case of a zombie apocalypse?
In case of one, or in the case that I'm in one?
In the case of a zombie apocalypse.
Okay, I got you. I guess feed my brother to the first zombie, and then book it to a farmhouse.
Smart.
That's just creating more zombies, man.
True. It's true. Also with us is Justin. Same question to you.
Lock all my doors, board up the windows. I don't know. I'm kind of with Ben's plan.
Well, wait a minute. Am I already in my house when it starts? Or do I have to find a house? I assume we all have to be starting in the same place. So I assume Justin starts where I started.
Oh. Where did you start?
I don't know.
We're all at Blockbuster. And
so we've time traveled.
Oh.
Yeah.
Dang.
We're all at Blockbuster right now. Zombie apocalypse happens. First thing you do.
Well, we got all we need
Lock
there.
the doors.
Lock the doors, yeah.
We're already at Blockbuster. We're done.
Snacks.
Yeah.
Perfect.
We got popcorn, candy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then you accidentally step on your glasses and no.
Yeah.
This was your best one yet, opening-wise, Chris.
Thank you.
If this is your first time listening to the show, this is a Casually Criterion episode, which is a Criterion Collection focused episode that we like to do every other week, where we review a film from the Criterion Collection that is voted on by the listeners. Before we get into our main review, we'll be doing our usual News on the March, where we talk about recent news and things that we've been watching. So if you haven't seen Night of the Living Dead, you can still listen. It'll all be time-stamped. And then we'll let you know when we get ready to move into our Casually Criterion review for Night of the Living Dead, spine number 909.
That's right. And as Mike mentioned, we let the listeners choose our Criterion films. So if you want to vote in those polls, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Casual Cinecast. The poll is posted on our Twitter account. If you want to send us any questions or topics to discuss, you can send messages to any of those accounts. You can also email those to casualcinemedia@gmail.com. And then, of course, if you haven't done so already, you like the show, you want to help other people find it, go onto iTunes, give us a 5-star review, or review us on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on. Give us a 5-star or whatever equivalent review that is, and that will help us out greatly.
Yeah, please and thank you. And I guess we should go ahead and just move into News on the March to get this on the road. What do you say?
Sure.
I'm going to stumble like a zombie into News on the March.
News on the March!
Guys, thanks for joining me on News on the March. Chris, I hope you're okay and you didn't stumble too hard.
Not too hard.
All right, good. Hope you didn't step on your glasses. So before we get talking about The Expanse, which I think the only thing we have to talk about this week that we've been watching, there was an article that was released by the New York Times, and it has to do with the Criterion Collection, which, listeners, we happen to do a podcast about.
Yeah, about half the time.
At least every other week.
Yeah, yeah. Most of the time. Half the time, whatever. But nonetheless, we thought this article would be something we should probably bring up on the show and maybe comment on. So, Justin, why don't you tell us a little bit about why we think this article is important and why we wanted to talk about it today?
Well, at first, I'll tell you what the article is. But the title of the article is, "Why Are There So Few Black Directors in the Criterion Collection?" And that's basically what it's about. It's pointing out that of the slightly over 1,000 feature films in the Criterion Collection, there are only 9 in the Criterion Collection that are from Black filmmakers. So that's basically it. It's kind of calling them out. It has some quotes from the president of Criterion. And it's important to talk about because I think culturally it's a pretty significant time to acknowledge, Black lives and Black voices and all of that sort of thing. So I think it's important to talk about it as opposed to, kind of ignore it. We could ignore it and just go review a Criterion film. But I think it's important to bring up because the article does make a lot of good points. 9 out of 1,000 isn't a lot.
No, it's actually surprisingly small. I would never have assumed it was that few.
It's less than 1%, I believe. I think Wes Anderson has more films in the collection by himself than a whole culture.
That's almost true. I think he has 8. Which, I mean, that's still a point, right?
Yeah.
And I think the reason that it feels that way, and I think this is to Criterion's credit a bit, is that it is fairly diverse, at least that it does represent a lot, even if it is skewed more towards like white male directors, which it probably is, right? But there is representation for LGBTQ. There's representation for Mexican filmmakers. There's a lot of Asian filmmaker, like a lot of Asian films, a lot of Spanish films, a lot of, there's a lot of, not a lot, but there's a good amount of female directors in here. And that's kind of growing. I feel like I've noticed a lot more over the last year or two that we're getting a lot more female directed films. So I think those things are kind of on the rise, as well as I think films by Black directors are. But I still think it's important to call it out just in case,
Yeah, absolutely. You don't want to have a blind spot. I mean, if you're going to be like the Criterion Collection and your goal is to bring light to overlooked and important films that need attention or need to be celebrated because they do something unique or celebrate the love of movies or whatever you feel like merits a title to be in the Criterion Collection, right? If you're going to pride yourself in being worldly and having a collection of films that best represent the best cinema, then this is something that they need to rectify, I think. And to their credit, I think the president of Criterion already has come out and said that they are planning on rectifying this soon. But it's good to see them being proactive about it. It's a shame that this article had to be put out there and point this out because I didn't know it. And now that I see it, like so few titles is just really...
That's ridiculous.
It's not good optics, it's bad.
I think I'm glad that this article got written because I don't necessarily think, or I don't know that there's any malicious attempt by, anybody at that company to exclude those things. Kind of some of the things the president talks about is like, how he has, like, he's in a bubble, like he hasn't watched certain films, or there are mainly just white people that are employed at Criterion, and so like bringing in voices of color and stuff like that can help them expand that bubble, right? And I think we all oftentimes put ourselves in these bubbles, like Mike was talking about, and I certainly did not realize there's just 9 Black directed films in the Criterion Collection. And it's because I was in my bubble, right? And because nobody had pointed it out to me yet. And I think...
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I don't think most people think of things that way, right? I don't know how many like female directed movies are in the Criterion Collection or how many, Japanese either. It's just something I've never thought to like wonder about. So it's good that this article exists to get us out of our bubble, like you said, to like point out things, be like, hey, you may be overlooking this and not even thinking about it, and that is possibly contributing to the problem, right? You need to think about it, otherwise they'll never be in the collection, these movies.
Yeah, kind of as I understand that, and I'll apply it to myself, but that's kind of the definition of privilege, because I don't have to worry about that because I'm already represented in it enough type of thing. At least that's kind of how I understand privilege. There was a quote by the president at the very end of the article that I really appreciated. But basically he was like, sometimes a collection can be defined as much by what's left out as what's actually in the collection.
Yep.
And I find that really powerful, and something that needs to be rectified. And it would be a completely different story if the president didn't seem to be as on board. Like, he's like, yeah, we've made a mistake. Like, we've got stuck in our bubbles and we haven't added these other voices of color into the collection, and that's on us.
If he had Chick-fil-A'd it and been like, these are my beliefs.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want them in there.
Right,
that
exactly. Yeah, we'd change the podcast probably.
yeah, that would be upsetting.
While I don't think that there's like any ill intent, and I feel comfortable with the way the president's responded thus far.
Well, I mean,
president of the Criterion Collection.
It was a good response, and yeah, he just basically admit when you're wrong. I respect people that can admit when they're in the wrong. They don't try to defend themselves. They don't try to deflect. Just be like, yep, we got to do better. And that's really all I want to hear, you know?
And I need to see follow through. You know, like, it's great to talk, yeah, I made a mistake, but now I need to see you change. And I need to see you get better at it.
We put out the press release, bullet dodged.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the thing, too, we have to take in mind is that let's say this article has the effect of having them look into more films by Black directors, we probably won't see the fruits of that until 2 to 3 years from now, because there is a long, extensive process that Criterion goes through, you know, to restore these films and to put together special features and all of that.
Yeah, unless they snag a new movie, right? They could Benjamin Button it.
Yeah, I guess
or they could
that's true.
Life Aquatic it.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, and I guess there is, I mean, I don't think there's necessarily needs to be a defensive Criterion, but there's a systemic problem just in Hollywood in general, you know, like where Black voices don't get heard very often, and as often as they need to. And it's gotten a lot better. Like we've talked about it in the past podcasts about the Black New Wave is kind of what Mike named it. So there are these voices that are coming, but there's also rights issues and stuff like that. But I don't necessarily think any of that's a legitimate excuse.
Yeah. And I think worth noting too is that the Criterion channel has a lot more on it than they can physically put out as physical releases too. So there is, I believe there's a good amount of stuff on there that's a bit more representative all the way around than there is in the physical release. So,
and that will probably give you some kind of indication of what physical releases you might see first.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. They kind of talked about that in the article as well, because they do mention that the online, the Criterion channel does have a much wider, diverse selection. But a lot of that's just because the streaming rights are a lot cheaper, is kind of what they talked about. So
it's certainly like the physical collection in the spine number is kind of the badge of honor here, right? Because we're not sitting here doing a podcast where we pick films from the Criterion channel. You know what I mean? And plenty of other podcasts out there. There's some that are covering Criterion channel, you know, but plenty of other ones that have been out there and have come and gone and still exist. All are doing the physical releases. That's like what's focused on, including ourselves. So it's important to get those out there.
I agree.
Yeah.
So we will probably dive into this subject a little bit more at the end of the show. What do you think, guys?
Yeah, why don't we just explain what we're doing, just since we're in that mode?
Well, why don't you do it then, Chris?
Okay, all right. Gladly, Mike. Well, since there's such a lack of Black directors in
we're going to help them out.
Huh? We're going to help them out, yeah.
We're going to
make some recommendations, Criterion Channel. I hope you're listening. So we're going to pick a film from a Black director that is not in the Criterion Collection. Just to kind of...
Each of us will choose
each
one.
of us, yes. Just to kind of like... I'm sure we don't have a giant listenership, but do our part in spotlighting these voices that should and could be heard.
Yeah. So stay tuned.
Okay, so the next on the docket is a show that I have just recently finished, probably like 2 days ago. And that show is The Expanse, which is a show that started out on Sci-Fi, or the Sci-Fi Channel, for the first 3 seasons, which makes sense because no one knows about it.
Yep.
And then it got moved to Amazon for the 4th season, which also makes sense because, like Netflix, they are crappy at advertising and letting people know they have cool stuff. So The Expanse is this science fiction show based on the books, a book series of the same name. And it's essentially takes place in the future where we have colonized the solar system, right? And wacky sci-fi things happen from there. I'll be vague, but let me just say that I have resisted watching this show for quite a while. I watched the first episode of this multiple times and was never able to get on board. I just wasn't. It felt like a sci-fi show, like something on the Sci-Fi Channel. But then the other day, I was looking for something to watch, and we are still in quarantine, so much time on my hands. I finally just binged it to like episode 3 or 4, and by then I was hooked. And pretty much since then, it was just a nonstop rush to just get through the Expanse. So much so that like I had to limit myself per night, so I didn't just blow through it. Like I could have watched all of season 4 in a day, because there's only 10 episodes, you know. Mm-hmm. But I literally had to like make myself do like 2 a night, just so I wouldn't like burn through it because I was enjoying it so much. But Justin, I know you haven't watched this show, but I know you read the books, right?
Yes, that's true. I'm currently in book 8. I'm about halfway through it, which that's the most recent book that's been released. And I think there's supposed to be a 9th and final book that's supposed to come out later this year. But with this year being this year, who knows? I mean, books are a little bit of a different story than films and other things, but I'm not going to put anything past 2020, you know?
Oh, that's true. So it's going to be 9 books, you said? Total? And then it's going to be done?
That's what I hear from Chris.
Yeah. It's 9 books. 3 trilogies is kind of how they looked at it. Like what I would call season 4 is basically the start of the new trilogy in the books.
Yeah.
So.
But I am a big fan of the book series. You know, they're not short books. They're between like 500 to 700 pages each. So I feel like it says something that I have read almost 8 of them now at that length.
Yeah, and you didn't start reading them that long ago, if I remember correctly. Like a year and a half ago?
Yeah, I was going to say about a year ago, I think, actually. Maybe it was a year and a half ago. I don't know. But, I read a little bit slowly, but also I do like a fiction book and then a nonfiction book and then a fiction book and a nonfiction book, right? So that's one of the reasons it's taken me so long to get through it, because otherwise I could see myself tearing through it, because it's very good and very interesting and really hooks you in, much like it sounds like the show did to you.
Yeah, it just took me about 45 minutes past the first episode to get there, right? The first episode feels very much like a pilot. The special effects don't look quite as good. I will also say that I first watched the first episode years ago when it was like kind of newish, and I didn't have a way to watch it in like super good quality. But now that it's on Amazon, I watch it in 4K, and man, the show looks pretty good. Like, It doesn't look as bad as I remember it looking whenever I watch like a 720 version. Because, Sci-Fi doesn't have the best options for streaming.
Right.
I will say that if you think you know what the show is, or you think you know what it looks like, or if you think it's like too cheap looking or whatever, go check it out on Amazon, man. Watch like the first 3 episodes, and if you're not hooked by then, it's not for you probably. But man, this show is just good. And like every time you think you like got an idea of what the story is, some new science fiction idea comes across that's just like, it just changes things for a while, and it just keeps the story constantly like unfolding, constantly being more interesting. And I don't know, it's just quite good. The politics in it feel really good. It feels like Game of Thrones at its peak sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, not quite as long as I would like it to be. Like, it would be awesome if this was like on HBO or something. I don't know. I definitely think that it is one of the best things that I've ever seen from the Sci-Fi Channel, and I really hope Amazon keeps going after season 5. I know they've renewed it for season 5, but I really hope they just keep pushing through, and I hope the viewership for this show starts to grow, because man, the show deserves much wider viewership than it has. And the idea that like something like The Mandalorian, which I love, can be nominated for like best drama whenever like something like this exists. And I'm sure there's a million other shows that are amazing dramas, right? I'm just saying, I know for a fact Mandalorian doesn't deserve that award. But something like this could easily deserve it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It'll have one more viewer as soon as I finish book 8. I'm going to hop in because you very much have sold me on it. You know, we haven't just talked about it right now. You've been, you know, talking to us, privately outside of the podcast as you've been watching it. So I'm really trying to tear through this 8th book so I can start the series because it's something in me doesn't want to start it while I'm reading this book.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Like my dad, he read the first Game of Thrones book and then the second one, A Clash of Kings. Like he was like halfway through that one by the time he decided to watch Game of Thrones season 1. And because of that, he just did not take to the show at all. Like, I don't think he finished it. He finished the whole show, right? But he didn't start liking the show until like everyone else stopped liking it. Like whenever like it overtakes the books and he doesn't have anything in his brain to like compare it to anymore, that's when he started finding himself to be able to enjoy the show. Because like he was expecting like the adaptation that was in his brain to be what he saw on the screen, and it just never lived up. So I'm hoping that you haven't shot yourself in the foot there and that you can actually find yourself enjoying the show and not feeling lackluster from it or whatever, you know?
Well, as somebody that read the books and then watched the TV show, what I will say is I don't know that I enjoy the TV show quite as much as you do, Mike. I do like it quite a bit. And that might be just because I read the books first. And
yeah,
like
well,
oftentimes,
I also don't have the books to compare it to yet.
Yeah, so yeah, me going into it that way might be the same way that Justin kind of deals with it. But like for the most part, I really enjoy the show. Like I think it's a well done show.
Yeah, it's interesting watching it because my girlfriend and I watched it, and neither one of us know what's going to happen, right? So there's no like, okay, now I'm waiting for this scene where this character does this. Like it's all just watching it unfold. So I'm wondering, like, I'm watching this on a level that you're watching it on a deeper level than me, but you're watching it on a level where you're not as engaged as me because you do already know what's going to happen. Yeah. And so it's like an interesting thing. It's like, when I watched Game of Thrones, I had, I watched season 1 and then I went through and read all the books. I didn't enjoy the other seasons as much until it got to the point where it started changing things, but then I stopped enjoying it because it was less good. But yeah, when you watch it knowing what's coming and you're just constantly waiting for the adaptation choices, you're watching it through like a different lens altogether, you know?
Agreed.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, but anyways, I will just say real quick before we move on from The Expanse, I just want to say that best science fiction show on TV right now, at least that I know of.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely worth watching. The ideas there are like just so fascinating. And I don't know, I enjoy living in this world, the world that exists between, Mars and Earth and people who live in the asteroid belts and all this stuff and the politics in between them. So
yeah, there's a lot of fun politics and stuff along with the cool sci-fi concepts, which I really like.
Yeah, and the sci-fi concepts are so much cooler than like you think they're going to be. I don't know. It just it just keeps getting cooler and cooler. I didn't know like at the end of the first season that it was going to get that cool at the end of the third season, so it just keeps paying off. So just try to get on board with it, listeners, and write us in. Let us know if you can get on board with the show, because I had a lot of trouble with the first episode, but once I got through it, I found it to be really worth it.
Yeah, and maybe a year from now, after, well, I guess you're caught up now, but you can read the books. I'll finish this book soon and start the show. But whenever you're done with the books, you can report back on how you feel about the books. I'll report how I feel about the show compared to the books, and we can have an even longer discussion.
Yeah, we'll have a whole experience.
Yeah.
All right, so that's all I really wanted to say about The Expanse. It's on Amazon Prime right now. Watch seasons 1 through 4. Enjoy it. It's good stuff. Okay, and I believe that's all we have this week for News on the March. I think it's time that we move into our film discussion for Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
What do you think? Spine number... Sorry, there's a Grammarly advertisement blocking the spine number. 909.
We're coming to review you, Barbara. That's my joke that I thought of all day.
Welcome to a night of total terror. Night of the living dead, the dead who live on living flesh. The dead whose haunted souls hunt the living whose bodies are the only food for these ungodly creatures. Night of the living dead. A bizarre adventure in fear. An experience in shock, more shattering than your strangest nightmare. Night of the living dead. A night with the dead who cannot die. A night of total terror. Night. Of the living dead.
All right, so as always with the Criterion films, we will not be doing our usual spoiler-free section before we get going like we do for our newer films. These Criterion films have typically been out for a while, so you've had plenty of time, usually decades and decades, to have seen them. So if you haven't seen Night of the Living Dead, we're going to go straight into spoilers. So pause the podcast now, go watch it, or if you don't care, keep listening and then decide if you want to watch it. Doesn't matter to me, but you have been warned.
All right, so Night of the Living Dead was directed by George A. Romero. It stars Dwayne Jones, Judith O'Dea, and Carl Hardman. The IMDb synopsis says, a ragtag group of Pennsylvanians barricade themselves in an old farmhouse to remain safe from a bloodthirsty, flesh-eating breed of monsters who are ravaging the East Coast of the United States.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to remember if I knew this took place in Pennsylvania.
I knew the East Coast.
Yeah, they talk about it like not
The Eastern Third.
Yeah, they're like it hasn't shown up west of the Mississippi except for southeast parts of Texas, Houston, which is where I'm at, was experiencing it.
Yeah.
But anyway,
So just a matter of time, I guess, as we know from the sequels. So who would like to get us kicked off on their thoughts for Night of the Living Dead?
who picked this movie in the poll?
Well, I picked the movie and won, so I'll go first. As a victory lap, if you will.
Yeah, I would love nothing more.
On this watch through, and probably like the first time I watched it, it was probably not a very good transfer, like or on a VHS tape or something like that a long time ago. So it's good to watch it on the Criterion channel, where it was a good transfer and everything looked really great. I enjoyed the black and white of this film. I thought it was really interesting and well shot for such a low budget movie. The acting, while not that great, like has a charm of its own, like in being like that B movie bad. Does that make sense? So there's a certain level of charm when, for me at least, like in these like kind of B movies where the acting's not great, but I don't know, there's something charming about it. Anyways, so I did enjoy the acting, even though it's not, top tier acting. I think the lead is actually really good. He's the best actor of the group. There's lots of interesting things in this movie going on, like social commentaries, if you will. Obviously, lots of people have talked about this before. I did find interesting that George Romero always claimed that he didn't cast him the lead because he was black. He did the best job, which is interesting to me, I find, and we'll probably talk about that later. But yeah, I really enjoyed this movie. I enjoy seeing the origins of the zombie film, and things were so great. One of the things I really liked about this movie, though, was the exposition. The way the radio tells you what's going on, and then later the TV tells you what's going on. And for me, like, especially with the radio, it was just going on in the background, right? And so other things are happening, but you can listen to this exposition of what's going on, and I found it really interesting and well done. So the exposition is spot on. But yeah, so Justin, what did you think?
Well, this is my second time to watch this movie, and I think with this movie or any of the sort of B horror movies, I think it's very easy to laugh at these films or to maybe look down upon them, in a way, for their campiness or, for being sometimes antiquated or outdated or have campy acting, whatever. And I remember really enjoying this film the first time and having a good time while watching it. But it's been so long since I've seen it that there was part of me that thought, okay, I'm going to go back and revisit this. Maybe kind of bad, kind of campy movie. It'll be a good laugh, and it'll be fun to see like one of the original. Maybe it's not the original zombie movies, but it's one of the movies that sort of laid out the template for zombies and all the zombie movies that would come after this film because of its eventual popularity. And I have to say, watching it this time, I was kind of like blown away. I kind of thought that the old me who had watched it before and really enjoyed it might have just been, enjoying it for the wrong reasons. But watching it, I found this really captivating this time. And some of the later sequences in the films when the massive zombies or things, I think they're called in the film, right? The things.
Yeah, they never use the word zombie.
Yeah, they don't. So maybe I shouldn't, or I'll try not to, but I bet I will. The things start breaking into the house, and like once things really heat up on that front, basically from where they start to like go outside and try to do their plan to go get gas and then escape or whatever, the movie really sucked me in, and I found it really intense. Prior to that, there is some hokey stuff. There is some things that feel maybe a little dated, but I also think it's kind of a hard movie to watch, having seen so many zombie movies now that have all of these same rules. Like, it's hard to watch a film like this and not like you yell at the characters in your head and be like, why don't you guys just shoot them in the head? Why are you not realizing that shooting them in the body doesn't work? Right?
Yeah. Didn't you learn that shooting them in the head worked a while ago?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's hard to get past some of that, and I think it is an unfortunate thing that does kind of hinder me from being totally engulfed in the movie. But once it picks up, like I am just so into it. I do just love this movie for reasons of it being a independent film, like people going out and shooting the film when they can, a few days at a time, and they take massive breaks between filming and just piecing this thing together, and to have it come out as good as it did and have it be popular. It's a bit like a Clerks or Paranormal Activity when it was out, where it was like this really cool story of this super indie film that could, right? Mm-hmm. And not indie film that could, like Little Miss Sunshine, that has like Steve Carell and Toni Collette and Alan Arkin in it, right? Like true indie film, like non-actors and a lot of non-professionals. Like I love the story behind this film and that it's gone on to inspire so much. Like, it's fun to watch for an appreciation sense. So it's partly like an entertainment thing of why I really enjoy this film, and partly just watching it kind of in awe that it exists and is as successful as it is. Like, I'm just impressed as much as I'm entertained. So I'm a big fan of it, and I think I'm going to watch it again soon, because I tried really hard to convince my wife to watch this with me because I think she'll enjoy it, and ultimately she didn't. But I reassured her after finishing it. I was like, this is really good. You need to watch it. So I'm going to try to convince her to watch it again within the next week or so. I think it's pretty wonderful. So that's where I'm at for now. So I'll pass it off to Mike. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I have probably seen Night of the Living Dead. This is my second time to see this version of it. I've actually seen the one that came out in the 90s. I've seen that one more, actually. I saw the one in the 90s that came out before I saw this one. The one directed by Tom Savini.
Okay, yeah, I have not seen that one.
Okay, well, anyway, it came out in 1990 or 91 or something like that, or maybe 89. I don't know. But so I've seen this story a few times. So I kind of knew what I was in for. But it's been a long time since I've seen this one in its entirety. The original, like the 1968 George A. Romero one. And it has that quality about it that a lot of like the classic indie movies have. Like you said, like Clerks, or I'm reminded of like El Mariachi by Robert Rodriguez.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like something that's not polished at all. It's a little sloppy, but man, does it have some passion behind it. Does it have some like blood, sweat, and tears behind it, you know? And I think that all makes a huge difference. And I think the audiences can feel that whenever this thing hit the scene, it was made with such passion and love. And it was just so ballsy and cool. And right in the height of the civil rights era, you know, this thing just hit, and the rest is history, right? But you're absolutely right that when you go back to watch this thing, it holds up, but it's not the stuff that you think, right? Like the rules of zombies are all there, and we know them before the characters do. So you kind of have to sit on your hands and bite your tongue and let them figure out they have to like shoot them in the head and all this stuff. But where the movie really shines, I think, is the interpersonal drama once they get to this house. Like you have different factions within it. You have like a little mini 12 Angry Men in the middle of this zombie outbreak, right? Where you have people debating the best course of action once they get in the house. They're like, we agree that being boarded up in this house is the best option. But what if they break into this house? What's step 2, right? And then you have one person arguing for the basement. And then you have one person arguing that the basement is a death box, right? And that you need to have exits everywhere. And so that stuff to me is like the stuff that I think Night of the Living Dead does to this day better than a lot of modern zombie movies.
Yeah.
You know, in modern zombie movies, you know, characters exist in archetypes to die, and that's essentially kind of what they do here too, but it just feels different here. It feels like they're actual characters with backstories. It has that 1960s kind of dialogue whenever exposition was more of a thing, and like really well-written dialogue that tells the story is more important than anything else, that I feel like maybe even George A. Romero's Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead kind of forget. I think Chris is absolutely spot on. I think the exposition and the script here is really where this movie shines, and I think that the further you get from the 60s and the more you get special effects heavy, the more you see that quality that makes this one so special and unique and good. You start to see that kind of get diminished and become more of the genre thing that it ended up being, you know? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I love a film where the threat is sort of this outside pressure and isn't necessarily, at least for a while, totally what the movie's about, right? Like in this movie, the things are outside and they're the potential threat of getting in, but we spend so much of this film on the inside with the characters arguing, and they're just peeking out and seeing these things kind of walk around somewhat harmlessly outside.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And it's only towards the end of the film that they really like en masse like go towards the house and start causing trouble. They are
their own worst enemies here. Like if they had all done things better, no one had to die, you know? And that's kind of the beauty of this movie, I think, is that like once they get into that farmhouse, it just becomes faction versus faction, person versus person, and then no working together, right? And because they can't work together, that ultimately leads to most people's downfalls once the farmhouse hits. Most of them.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, is it debatable that once they finally get a plan together and start working together and go out to try to pump gas, is that when that's when things kind of go wrong, though.
True, but also even that wasn't going according to plan, even from the very beginning, because the one girl wasn't listening.
Oh yeah, she runs out there, and
the one dude didn't stop her, and anyway, it just kind of, it's human error on every end that ended up being their downfalls, I guess.
Every time I pump gas, I have that issue.
you just pull it out and spray it everywhere.
It just sprays everywhere, and then it catches on fire. It's really something that the gas stations need to take a look at.
Yeah, so I do want to talk about the acting a little bit, just in the sense, Chris, you kind of called it out, but I do think Dwayne Jones is really good in this. And I guess we have to call out, you said that he was cast supposedly by George Romero as the best actor, and not because he's black, right? They didn't have it in the script, I don't believe, to my understanding, as like, a black character. And there's something I was reading or watching, and someone was talking about, like, at this time, you just, unless you were Sidney Poitier, you didn't cast a black lead in your film. And even then, there's a reason for that character to be black, because the film is about race, or there is a race issue. And
right, the heat of the night.
Yeah. Well, guess who's coming to dinner, that sort of thing. And what's cool, and I didn't really think about this until I had heard them say that, but like, for Ben's character, there's no reason for that character to be black, right? And so this is one of an early example of a black actor being cast in a lead just because he's good, not because they need the character to be black. Like, this character could have been white, could have been anything. There's some added elements to it. Like, the film gains something by having that, I think, things that you can read into, but that's not the reason, right, that they cast him. And I think that's really cool to see him, just like, it's kind of puts him on equal footing in a way.
Yeah, and I think it's ballsy, and it's super brave and bold, especially for 1968. And what I will also say is, like you said, there are some added elements that actually improve from him being a black man cast as the lead in 1968. And I think one of them's the end.
Oh, yeah. Like, yeah, it would not have the same punch. I mean, granted, this is a movie that came out 40 years later, or 35, 40 years later, but the movie Cabin Fever has the same ending, but like with a white person, basically. And that movie is going to be forgotten, and that's going to be forgotten. But this, like, even now, watching it today, I think it's just insanely impactful, whether by chance or design.
Yeah, those still frames afterwards, like
the
where they're
meat
like
hooks?
dragging the meat hooks. I'm just like, whoa, like that the ending is so great. Like, it's worth the whole movie's great, I think, but that ending was like the cherry on top. It just it makes everything so much better and more relevant.
Right, and then also, like, in the script, the stuff that, like, you mentioned that it was written for anybody, it didn't necessarily have to be a white or black man or whomever. Man, I almost wish we didn't know that, right? Because then, like, the arguments in the house could take on this another meaning, right? Like, this tension below the surface of, like, this black man basically telling these people, like, listen, I'm in charge here because I'm the smartest, I'm the most capable, I'm basically telling you what to do. Shut up and do what I tell you to do. And that creates tension, right? But if they had, if I wasn't aware in my brain that, supposedly it had nothing to do with the lead being black, Dwayne Jones, that scene's less good now, right? Because the tension and, like, the social commentary there and what I read into it almost helps improve this, what would otherwise be just a standard horror.
Well, it's still there. I mean, do you feel like you can't read that, knowing that it's not the intention?
It is there, but I feel like if they had leaned into it a bit more, you could have better results. Possibly.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, who knows how the performances might have changed, with a different actor. I guess there's a lot of things, like, once that casting decision is made, who knows, what kind of things they talked about that influenced it, right?
Right, yeah.
I do remember, I forget where it was. This is a long time ago, though, watching some interview. It was somebody, it's like, a black person talking about him just slapping the white woman, and they're like, we can't do that, like like that's not a thing that we see, or even a black man being in charge of that situation is so abnormal for 1968. I think telling the white people what to do, it changes it inextricably, and it's interesting that it's just a casting choice. That's all it takes, to change everything in the way I view it so much. And they don't necessarily even have to change the script, as far as what I understand of the way this movie was made.
Yeah, and also with, when he slaps Barbara, but there's also the scene where he fights Harry Cooper, and there's somewhere someone was saying, like in 1968, to see that, like a black male lead fighting and beating up a white male was just kind of shocking.
Yeah, I remember we mentioned this earlier, but in the heat of the night, I remember whenever I watched that movie, I was watching on DVD and I watched the special features. And there was a feature called like The Slap Heard Around the World.
Oh yeah.
Where like someone slapped Sidney Poitier in that movie and he slaps them right back. He slapped like a white man, I think maybe like a sheriff or something, or like a rich man. And like apparently that slap was just like, holy crap. Like it was just, you felt it if you were in the audience at that time and place. Everyone understood the implications of that slap and the power dynamic shifting in a way that audiences weren't used to seeing, especially in American mainstream films like that. So I have no doubt that had to have at least been on their mind somewhat when making this movie. And I refuse to believe that maybe they didn't lean into it a bit.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's impossible. But like you're saying, like Chris said, that dynamic really does add a whole nother layer to this movie that I do not want to lose, or would not want to lose.
Yeah, I do think losing that, it loses my interest a little bit. Like if it was just a white guy, I've seen a bunch of those films, and even now, I don't know that I've seen a bunch, like. So we talked about this movie being a movie that is continually being ripped off and changed, and the same story being told over and over again, except for in one area, and that is literally the black man being the lead. Like that's the one thing that we left behind with this movie, I think.
Yeah, and even in George A. Romero's follow-ups like Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, Land of the Dead, all the like they didn't have the same kind of oomph that this one does. Now, don't get me wrong. I think the original Dawn of the Dead is a brilliant horror film, and I love it. I love it quite a bit, actually. But it's not the same as this.
Yeah.
This is something that I can see in the Criterion Collection, and Dawn of the Dead is something I see like Blue Underground, or or like some lesser prestigious company releasing for like horror fans, and that's fine too. There's that can be equally fun. But I think this one rises above the genre and could be considered something else.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that just goes down to the casting of that lead character.
But I don't know that's entirely that. I think you're maybe underselling the rest of the movie a bit. It does set up a lot of these tropes in a very clear and wonderful way. The exposition is nice. The dialogue is all clear inside the house. Maybe the acting's a little hokey, but that's pretty par of the course for the 60s.
Yeah.
I think this movie does a lot well. I think the whole debate about the basement or not is fascinating. I think the gas station sequence is wonderful. And if you look at other films in 1968, they're not filmed with quite that kind of amount of energy. I mean, you have Bonnie and Clyde and Wild Bunch right around the corner, but the 60s were very different filmmaking language. And I think this movie was very much like part of that 70s new wave that was right around the corner.
Yeah, it's on the forefront of that, but much like Bonnie and Clyde is, I think. And the other thing too, I really like this film's portrayal of shock with the Barbara character, because we spend the intro of the film thinking this is our main character.
Right, it psychos us for a minute.
Yeah. Which I think is really cool. I do find myself this time, it is only my second time, but I was waiting for her to come back around and be more important, and she's kind of not. Like
Yeah,
other than
she's just there
being in
to
shock.
introduce us to the shock. Yeah.
Which I
And-
like.
And for a long time, I couldn't remember if it was her husband or her brother at the beginning of the movie that was bitten.
Yeah.
Did you guys have that problem too?
Yeah, she doesn't say it till later, and I was like, oh, it's her brother. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway.
And you know, we've talked plenty about, you know, casting a black man as the lead and the social implications that come from that. But I think one of the other things that makes this so relevant, and it's kind of a bit of the underlying theme in a lot of zombie type movies, but particularly with this one is the zombies or things themselves, right? Like there was a lot of, you know, with the civil rights movements and other things going on in the country, there was a lot of rioting and sort of police brutality. There was, I think, I don't think it was when the film was being made, but I think when the film really caught on and became this cult classic hit, I believe I read that it came out shortly after Kent State, where it was police, military shot protesters, right? Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot of social commentary with these things. You know, they're not called zombies in the film. They're sort of like senseless murder, senseless violence, and I think you can equate it to a riot. And I think that is felt in this film too, maybe a little bit more than other zombie films that also make it feel a little bit elevated.
Yeah. Well, you have, okay. So, you know, after September 11th, a lot of movies get credited with taking 9/11 imagery into their movies, right? And using it for powerful visuals, right? Like War of the Worlds gets that a lot, you know, when Tom Cruise is running around and gets the ash all over him, and you know, even things like Batman versus Superman get it because like the buildings and like the, you know, the imagery you can't help but associate with something so famous. The visual language of this movie is so similar to like what we see when we look back at like pictures of the 1960s, and even now when you see like militia, quote, gathering around with their stupid guns and their dumb camouflage and their baseball caps, you know, like that's the people cleaning up at the end of this movie, right? Like they're walking around, they're shooting everybody, they're breaking it up, they're attacking the good and the bad at once without any kind of discrimination or want to get it right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's very much like the mob is clearing up the streets, the good and the bad. This man is a fucking hero who's a survivor, right? And we don't know if they thought he was a zombie or if they're like, oh, nope, let's just shoot him. You know, like they were going to get away with it. You know what I mean? Like that's the ending that is good and that I want to see here, you know, is that I don't know that person didn't know that he wasn't a zombie.
He had a gun in his hand. Like that's a good.
He was
good
like yelling, you know, like.
I don't think he says anything.
Well, maybe he doesn't say anything, but I don't know. He was coming out of the closet. He was huddled down there. He was looking out the window. None of that behavior seems like conducive with what the zombies are acting like, right?
Yeah.
So,
well, they don't
very much. Yeah, it just very much seems like they were in the position of power. You know, personal prejudices may have been there or not. We don't know. It's better if we don't know as far as an ending, you know?
Yeah, and they also don't take the time to try and figure it out. They don't call out to him, you know, whatever. I mean, maybe there is some prejudice in there, but also I think there's something about, you know, just in that moment, the sort of lowest common denominator, greatest common denominator, whatever it is, lowest, I think, is like just shoot anything that moves. And you know, it's kind of like you hear people talk about post 9/11, we are ready to sign the Patriot Act and give up our civil rights and our personal rights in the name of preventing terrorist attack ever again, right? And I think there's this sort of like panic mode about it of like, do whatever it takes and don't try to do the right thing. They don't try to call out to this guy. They don't be like, hey buddy, are you okay? And, you know, because I don't think these things represent a fast threat. I think it'll stumble towards you. And at this point, they should know that.
And they've got enough guns and
yeah, they even said it's easy enough to take them out once you know how to do it.
Yeah. So I don't know. It just reminds me of that sort of thing of something horrible's happened and let's just do whatever it takes and not really care about what that means.
Yeah. React and don't think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think either of those are valid. I think both of them are good endings, right? It's either carelessness or prejudice or both, But either way, it says something about whenever people are scared and they organize in their stupid little, like, redneck bands where they're gonna cure everything. They're gonna fix it. Good old boys, Like this mentality. Although they're helping, sure, can also destroy a lot of lives and destroy a lot needlessly, I guess I should say.
Yeah. And that is all sort of one area where the black and white footage really works for me, because when we're in the house and dealing with the internal conflicts inside between the characters, we do get some pretty stylized sort of like chiaroscuro type lighting, lots of shadows, and it seems kind of intentionally lit. Maybe this is a budget thing and it happened to work out, but the shots of the things themselves, and especially a lot of the footage of the end of this militia coming through, it just feels very news footage like. And I don't remember which one of you said it, but you said, the visual imagery of the like current like things going on in the world kind of bled over into film. And I think so, like, that feels like footage I would see of like an old newsreel from the 60s of like civil rights riots and marches or protesters, right? So like,
that's what I was trying to say. Yeah.
So I just love how it ended up. Maybe it's another accident, like casting Dwayne Jones as the lead, like to have this sort of like handheld, not particularly well framed or lit, just kind of pointing a camera at things that are happening, sort of like documentary newsreel feel to some of this.
Yeah, like the image at the end when they have like the still images of them like carrying off the bodies in meat hooks.
Yeah.
That feels like something that could have just been like a still image from a history book that was some terrible thing that happened.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like it feels like a news report or something. And I'm like, what is this? Exactly. A documentary? Are these real? And just to call out the thing, the influence of that, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, doesn't that end similarly? With the cops go into the house?
I know the remake did. It's been I think the original one ends with Leatherface just screaming around on the road, spinning his chainsaw, right?
Right.
And then the girl gets away in the spoilers for Texas Chainsaw Massacre,
sure.
But the girl gets away.
Okay, maybe it is the remake.
The remake, they like the trailer was like, there's footage of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre that's never been seen. Lightbulb flash.
Yeah, well, I guess
Light
it's that
flash.
one. Yeah, the end of it is like, maybe it's like a post-credit sequence or something, and they like the cops go in, and then it's like a bunch of photos like that.
Like they try to Blair Witch it, kind of like.
Yeah, which is maybe the most effective part of that movie.
I don't remember it.
But anyways, I see that influence.
Yeah, and I mean, you can even see the influences, like the news report. That's like been in like every zombie movie after that. Like my mind goes to the remake of Dawn of the Dead that Zack Snyder did.
Yeah.
Where Tom Savini, the guy who directed the 1990 version of Night of the Living Dead, is actually like the sheriff in that movie, and he's talking about putting them all down and killing them, and he's got sunglasses on,
Yeah.
So the tropes are there, laid out clearly.
Yeah. My favorite reference from this film is in Shaun of the Dead, which was a film I was a big fan of before I ever saw this film. So it was super fun to watch this film for the first time and, hear the "they're coming to get you, Barbara" line, in this film, and realize that Sean's mom is named Barbara. And at one point, Nick Frost's character yells like, "We're coming to get you, Barbara," on the phone. And I think that's a really funny, like, super cool nod.
Yeah. Very subtle.
Yeah. Because it's not like that same delivery. It's just.
Right. Yeah. It's different context.
Yeah. Like I didn't even peg it as a reference, until I saw this movie and I was like, oh, I see.
Yeah. I didn't even know it till you just told me. And I'm like, oh, I get it. It's funny.
Yeah.
Wow. I think I'm about expired on my thoughts.
I have one the point. And this question is for Mike, but Chris, feel free to jump in, of course. But Mike, I think ever since I've known you, you've kind of notoriously been a person who says that, or generally believes that children in horror films used as like the creepy child don't necessarily work for you. And I don't want to paint you into a corner, but with that, So feel free to disagree,
no,
but I've just heard you say that
it is
a
a
lot.
pet peeve of mine. I don't like doing that traditionally in a movie. Let's put it this way. The more the kid talks and has to be creepy, the more belabored it is. Or, alternatively, there's this trope that was going around for a long time in the 2000s where kids draw creepy pictures and the parents like find the pictures and then get disturbed by like what the kid has been drawing in their own imagination.
Right, yeah. Yeah.
I could go most of my life and never see another one of those movies or another one of those scenes.
Yeah. Well, how did you feel about the girl in this one?
Good. It wasn't used to the extent that it could have been. That said, you see it coming a mile away.
That's us knowing the zombie rules, right? Like once we find out she's
exactly.
bitten.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. I mean, there was no bad dialogue. There was no silliness. Like, I think where that stuff tends to really go bad for me is like, do you remember spoilers for the remake of Pet Sematary that just came out this last year?
Yeah.
But do you remember when the kid turns evil in that?
Yeah. I remember.
And it just becomes the stupidest goddamn thing in the entire world. And it's like the kid's talking and making creepy noises. And the more that kid does, the more you hate it.
Yeah. I gotcha.
So less is more when it comes to kids in horror movies is the lesson I think we should take away from this. Is don't make them talk, and certainly don't make them draw a picture of anything creepy.
Yeah, I like that the first time we see her as a zombie, she's just already consuming the dad, right? Like there's something that really works and really creeped me out.
Well, and she didn't kill him either. Like he just didn't she, or did she kill him?
Oh no, yeah,
He'd been shot.
He'd been shot, but like he's still kind of alive
yeah.
last time we see him, although he's not doing well.
Yeah. It's like the less is more. That she comes in and it's already happening. That's more disturbing than seeing the kid wake up and then
attack him and jump on him or whatever.
Attack him and him like, "What are you doing? I love you."
Although it is pretty creepy when she starts stabbing the mom.
Yeah, I've forgotten how much the zombies in this movie actually like to use tools to stab and break things.
Yeah.
Maybe my one big pet peeve in terms of hokiness is that mom character, like the unhappy wife sort of thing. Like there's a long segment where she's just a couple of times where she's just standing there not doing anything and like yelling, and it's like you're not even moving or trying to run away. Like why don't you just move? Like, you know what I mean? And she kind of does the same thing when she sees the daughter and she like falls over and then she just kind of like lays there like being like, no.
Yeah.
As like the daughter walks over to her and stabs her in the chest. I'm like, you weren't like, you didn't break your legs or anything. I don't know. Why are you laying there so long? I don't know. That's like,
it was the shock of seeing her daughter that way.
Sure.
Yeah. She's never seen a zombie movie before, Justin.
Yeah.
Well, that's not, that's not a zombie movie thing. I think that's it. Like I've fallen and now I'm going to get up or whatever.
But the horror of seeing your child eating your dead husband.
Yeah, but she did it another time before that too. I think she's like she's standing by the window and arms are coming through the window.
She's got vertigo, Justin.
Maybe. I mean, maybe
she's got an ear issue.
Like Lucille too.
Yeah. Maybe she has narcolepsy, but narcolepsy where she's also screaming and yelling at the same time. So she was just asleep. I don't know. While we're throwing out,
she's got narcolepsy and night terrors at the same time.
Anyways. That might be my one complaint I feel a little legitimate about, that kind of frustrates me watching it in terms of like character actions.
That's fair. That's typical horror movie frustration.
Yeah. I don't mind the one in the basement because like that there's something so brutal about the kid stabbing her that like is really impactful, surprisingly impactful.
Yeah.
So I'll live with it. Okay, but now I am done.
Cool. Well, we hope you enjoyed our review of Night of the Living Dead. Any thoughts, questions, comments, whatever you guys have, send them our way. We'd like to hear your thoughts on our review and anything we said throughout the course of it. But now, I think it's time that we move into choosing our next Casually Criterion theme and listing our choices for the good people to vote on. What do you guys say?
Yeah, I guess I don't know if it is technically Casually Criterion because we are choosing non-Criterion films from Black filmmakers. That's our theme. So I don't know if we're going to cause this call it a Casually Criterion episode, or is it just a regular episode? I don't know.
Who knows?
Casually should be Criterion.
There you go.
There you go. So, like Justin just said, so each of us are going to choose a film from a black filmmaker that is not in the Criterion Collection, and then we are going to choose basically each one that we want to be in the Criterion Collection. Listeners will vote, and then we will review the winner.
Yeah. So is this one that we want to be in the Criterion Collection, or because I have some films that I might go with that I have never seen that I've just heard really good things about?
So whenever you guys were talking about this, what I understood it to be, these are films that we would choose from black filmmakers to be in the Criterion Collection. So we could help them out with their lack of diversity.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. I can probably do that.
All right. So I will kick us off.
Okay. Sounds good. Go ahead.
All right. So this is tough for me because there's a lot of films I haven't seen. But I'm going to choose one I have that I think should be in the Criterion Collection. And this is a film I saw a long time ago on Turner Classic Movies. And it stars Cuba Gooding Jr. and Ice Cube, and that is Boys in the Hood by John Singleton from 1991.
Yeah, that was one I really thought about picking. I like this movie.
I really, really like this movie quite a bit, and the fact that I don't hear about this movie more now, I haven't heard about this movie in years, and for a while I heard about it all the time, and I think it's a shame because I think it's a great movie, like a great movie.
Yeah, I've never seen it, so I look forward to getting the opportunity to watch it again, or watch it, yeah.
Watch it again for the first time?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Chris, what is your choice?
Yeah, so this is a movie I saw a very long time ago. It is directed by Carl Franklin, and it stars Denzel Washington, and it's Devil in a Blue Dress. Have either of you guys seen this?
I have not. I've actually seen an embarrassingly small amount of 90s Denzel movies.
I went through a Denzel phase where I got a bunch of movies.
He's
and
so symmetrical.
Going through those. Yeah. But yeah, this is a noir movie. Kind of takes place in the LA Confidential time. I really like the detective movies, and Denzel Washington, I think, is really, really great in this role. So I really hope that this one wins because I'm sure Boys in the Hood is good, but it's not Devil in a Blue Dress good. What you got, Justin?
Well, man, I'm so tempted to pick a film I haven't seen because it sounds really good, and I've heard a lot of good things about it, and I've always wanted to see it. And it seems like the most likely, it should be in the collection more than any of the films that I have seen. So, Chris, you said I can pick it. Mike, do I have your permission?
I guess.
All right. Well, so it's 2011's Pariah by Dee Rees. So apparently it is a film about young lesbians coming of age in Brooklyn. And it's about a 17-year-old. And I've just heard really good things about it. It's shot by Bradford Young, who I believe he shot a film we reviewed, A Most Violent Year. Among
I thought you were going to say Solo, things. A Star Wars Story.
No, I want to avoid that one. I mean, that movie looks good. That's one of the things it has going for it, in my opinion. But anyways,
it does look good.
Anyways, Pariah, it's a film I've heard about before. I've seen it around. I've always wanted to watch it. And it's constantly on these best films by black directors lists. As I was looking things up for this, so I have to put it in there, I think.
Yeah, I remember seeing the trailers for this movie a long time ago, and then it just went under my radar, and I never got to see it. It disappeared from the conversation. So I would love to get a chance to watch Pariah.
Yeah, same. So that's my choice. Okay, so to recap, Mike chose Boys in the Hood, Chris chose Devil in a Blue Dress, and I chose Pariah. And that poll will be up on our Twitter. If you're hearing this, it will be up before this episode's out. So check the show notes if you're not already following us on Twitter. And if you're not following us on Twitter, follow us on Twitter.
Yeah,
it's that easy.
Please and thank you.
Cool. So anything else, or does that do it for this episode?
That does it for this episode for me.
Yeah, I think that wraps everything up.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. And then, of course, as always, thank you, Jake Wagner Russell, for doing our intro and outro music. If you want to hear more of his music, you can do so at soundcloud.com/bopscotch.
Stay tuned to this feed. Our next episode will be on whatever wins the poll we just talked about. So we look forward to it.
Yes.
Join us.
Yeah, thanks so much for listening, guys. Step out of your bubble every once in a while, and we will see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.